Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Inventing Construction. I'm Ross Griffin, and today we have a very special guest, Dr. Bola Abisogun. I think I got it right. I'm not too sure. He's going to correct me in a minute anyway. But come here, let me introduce the main topic today and the subtopics. So we're going to look at and discuss digitization in the next generation. Super important as always, looking at the next generation. Subtopics today are, do we really need to digitize? Question mark. I think we already know the answer to that one. With the next generation coming out of universities, are universities fit for purpose at the moment? Interesting question. And what about the LSBU? I think Bola is going to really tell us about this. It's a very interesting concept that you developed over the last number of years, but we'll get into it. And where are we heading in the future when it comes to, well, education, digitization, the development of the industry right now? But let me not delay. So, Bola, over to you, buddy.
Thank you.
Can you introduce yourself there so everybody gets to know you? Most people know you anyway from LinkedIn, you know.
Thank you, Wes. Yeah, so Dr. Bola Abisogun OBE. I'm the Chief Excitement Officer of the Digital Twin Skills Academy, as you know. And I'm the Chief Excitement Officer, as in I like to make people smile. Yeah. That is by design, not by accident. And I think, look, first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity, Ross, because I've been watching you afar from at least 20 years now. And this conversation is probably way overdue. Yeah. But, you know, for my day job, what do I do? I'm a practicing PQS, although non-practicing, because I'm trying to disrupt what we do as traditional quantity surveyors. And my passion spot at the moment is digital twins and their relationship with delivering projects. My use case is building safety.
Okay, interesting.
And it's about what we can do for the industry to not only inspire the next gen, but to actually change the way we deliver projects.
And it's much needed at the moment because the amount of inefficiencies that we have in our projects, the challenges around, for me as a cost manager, quantity surveyor, it's the amount of wasted cost when delivering projects. We could be doing so much more with the wasted money in our industry from a social perspective, etc. But yeah, it's a very interesting time we're in within the industry right now, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Like it's a kind of the next revolution or evolution in the industry.
It is. I call it a paradigm shift. Yeah. We're going through, I also call it a Jeff Bezos moment insofar as saying new models are going to be created, new business models. Yeah. But if there's any time for us to sell this industry, it's now. Yeah. Or resell it. Yeah. Or find a way of rebranding it. Yeah. It's now. Yeah. And that's why I'm excited about it.
Yeah, and I think we reflect a little bit on the little bit of consultancy that we do within Cosmos, and we always kind of try to reflect inwardly in ourselves going, hang on a second, how do we want to work and who do we want to work with and how do we want to work? Absolutely. Those business models, those relationships, as you mentioned, are changing. We find that it's an awful lot more specialized companies and partnerships and altering the way we communicate and negotiate together, you know.
I agree. And I think, look, for me, and, you know, for those that know what I've been doing or trying to do for at least 20 odd years now, I just think that the QS as was can offer so much more value. Yeah. Right. And we got to unlock that value using digitization. Yeah. Right. So we can educate everyone.
Yeah. Into the first real question then is, do we really need to digitize? Obviously, your opinion looking at digital twins, and this is where I find it interesting, a quantity surveyor, trained quantity surveyor, QS looking at digital twins. Isn't digital twin a design output, you know, is what you say? Let's get into it.
Here we go. Yeah, that's a great question. I think, look, let me be clear. I think my initial relationship with twinning was back in 1993, 94 when I wrote my first thesis. Yeah. It was a process level twin, right? So back then, and I'm sure I've shared it with you or your colleague. My thesis spoke about using artificial neural networks and hypertext expert systems for claims management in 93, 94, right? And by default, because we're data mining all of the case law, we're data mining different data sets, we're pulling information together. It was a process level twin by today's definition, right? That's over 30 years ago. So bringing the visualization, your models into play makes the 5D twin more relevant. But we've been in this 5D space for years, Ross, without realizing it, right? Now, when you add digitization, in my case, unlocked by the Building Safety Act, which talks about the golden thread, you're in a situation where everyone has no choice.
Yeah. So the inevitability really is that we have to digitize. We're on the journey anyway as it is at the moment, but we're hearing a lot in the industry still that is there value in it for quantity surveyors? Is there value in it for us as a consultant? And I don't know what your experience is, but the traditional consultancy model is based on bums on seats, people solving problems, operating in a chaotic environment to figure out what happened retrospectively, looking backwards. And you're wondering, going, are we still here? Are we still doing this? You know?
I don't think that model has much life left, Ross, if I'm honest. We're in a very agile environment now. I think the QS for some time has been challenged around what does the value proposition look like, right? And I think now, with the building safety and the golden thread, there's no choice but to try and lead, right? Our challenge in our sector is not about really recognizing what has to happen. It's who's going to do it first, right? Who's going to disrupt their own business model first and find a way out. And the bigger firms are suffering. The smaller firms, more nimble, agile, they're running ahead. A lot of them are. Lots of great stuff happening. So how do you kind of standardize that, right? This is where the whole RICS conversation comes. How do we standardize all of those ways of doing things, producing cost reports, talking to clients, giving advice? But digitization to me is the silver bullet. And that's where we need the upskilling. We can't do any of this stuff properly.
No,
without upskilling.
No, and upskilling is key to it for sure. And what I've noticed over the last number of years, the last decade, I would say, is that the growth in demand for quantity surveyors globally has increased, but yet we're not producing more to service that industry in reality. And so, where we look at it is a labor issue. You know, how can we do more with less? Well, the only way you can do more with less is be more efficient. Okay, how can we be more efficient? Well, you need to digitize. Look at your process flow. Look at how you work within that process flow. And if you're still with pen and paper, you know, I always use the analogy of measuring the foundation type A at REBA stage 1, remeasuring the same foundation again at stage 2. I'm going to do it again at stage 3, and sure, just for the fun of it, I'll do it again at stage 4, and I'll do it again during the construction of claims and final account. And I'm doing the same thing repetitive over and over again. Surely we can digitize it, and perhaps hopefully we can automate it.
That's my view. That's my view. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I'm also saying to people, look, even if you think that you can't trust the data coming out of a machine, then that's our value to validate it, right? That's our value proposition. And I think so many people are uncomfortable in that space. Ross,
it's all new, right?
It's new, right?
So it's easier to reflect back onto the old method of measurements and the traditional takeoff paper and the traditional BOQs, and keep kind of spinning that. But the reality is changing dramatically. What we've noticed in the international market is where quantity surveyors kind of isn't a traditional profession within that industry. Is that people are automating it. The companies are doing it. They're automating. They're automated BOQ, automated tender processes, quantum from models, and they're focusing on quality assurance.
There you go.
As opposed to quantity surveying, quantification, if you like.
I agree.
And so we're saying, if we don't do something as a profession, we will be left behind. We'll be, in some respects, irrelevant. And I'm generalizing, of course, because it's our discipline is multifaceted in reality. It's not just about quantum, but the basis of a lot of what we do.
Correct. And I think you make a really good point about the international market. One of the areas I'm really focused on is North America. A couple of reasons why. By spend alone, it's a 12x market on the UK. 12x market on the UK. And they do not have an established cost management profession.
No.
And they hemorrhage money on projects in many ways, right? And they've got this really interesting conversation or relationship between the architect and the engineer. No impartiality on cost, but the client picks up the bill. Well,
that's an open market for those consultants and the contractor.
Correct.
We were doing a couple of projects a few years ago, and I was surprised, but I wasn't surprised. But the amount of trust and leaning the client needed to do on the contractor in order to understand commercials on the project, albeit the contractor being completely contractually biased when advising his or her client on the commercial viability of the project. And you're kind of going,
I know.
There's a conflict of interest here.
I know.
I've said the same thing. Does anybody notice this, or is this just me? And so I think you just hit a really interesting point. There's a huge market there in the US and North America, and there's a lot of really good small companies out there as well trying to do that, and the large companies are there as well, of course. But it is a huge market for sure. what I did notice is that that the digitization piece, from a contractor's perspective, some contractors was quite good, but again, the client was the weakest weakest link, weakest person in the room.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of work from a QS perspective to bring those clients up. So
100%.
It's not a question anymore of, do we really need to digitize? It's, have you not started yet?
Yeah, exactly. And I've had a really interesting conversation with a major multi-billion-dollar real estate asset owner based in New York. And I was surprised that they hadn't realized the value proposition of the digital twin. And my focus, my use case was decarbonization.
Yeah.
Like, there are new laws.
Yeah.
Let's just take Local Law 97 in New York City, right? That is now penalizing asset owners if they don't decarbonize or evidence the carbon neutrality of their assets.
Yeah.
And I was saying one of the best ways to evidence your attempt, or what I call the net zero carbon position in real time, is using a digital twin. Yeah. And it blew them away. And none of their asset management team had even considered.
Yeah. Are there consultants, for that matter, coming in and advising them in that direction? But again, if you change the current business model, a lot of us are going to get affected. So
exactly right.
It's a political thing. Business as usual is better for the majority than the minority, whereas disruption is better for the minority than the majority.
That's how we say it.
Yeah. So that's what makes it exciting from our perspective, at least. But you mentioned the Building Safety Act. Can you talk a little bit about that, just for our listeners that are maybe not from the UK?
So, globally, there is huge recognition of what took place on the 14th of June 2017, when that 24-story tower burned for 60 hours and 72 people lost their lives. Right? Out of that tragedy came the Building Safety Bill, which received royal assent April 2022 and became operational in its totality 6th of April 2024. So we are fast approaching the first year anniversary of its operational phase. But we're also approaching the 8th year anniversary of the tragedy. So in my head, and I took this prospect to the team at CDBB, the Centre for Digital Build Britain at Cambridge, and I managed to convince some of those very, very gifted academics that the use case from a pre-construction perspective on that project, had they created a twin during pre-construction, it's unlikely that cladding would have been on the building for a number of reasons. So today, given that we now have a legal requirement called the golden thread, which suggests that once you put something into planning and full design and then you put it into construction, that by the time you've finished, as we call it here, Gateway 3, you end up with a 5D digital twin of what you've built. So that the whole life cycle for the next 30 years, you can manage that asset and optimize performance. So that for me is the best use case arising from the Building Safety Act. The challenge is for us, we just don't have enough people in the industry either prepared to work like that, understanding the deliverables are possible. But to your point, clients are still not in the room yet on this ask.
They're the decision makers. Like, at the end of the day, they just as consultants, you're only going to do what your client is asking you.
Yeah. And so I call it the era of the intelligent client, right? Where clients themselves have to raise their game now. And the good thing about, well, from my perspective, the good thing about the Building Safety Bill, now Act, is that the asset owner, the accountable person, cannot delegate their legal responsibilities. Right? They can't do that. They could make it happen. Get the right people on board. Make sure everyone's competent. Deliver the best outcome for the end user and the occupier.
And that's where it's changing dramatically, isn't it? The end user and the occupier, from a sustainability perspective as well. The end user and occupier were really relevant. It was it was the return on investment for me as the investor. That's where the focus point was, and the focal point was, I don't really care what happens after the building. Maybe I sell it after 2 years. Who cares? Now the responsibility is on you as the investor, because you're the initial decision maker on how the building was designed, built, the business case around it and everything. It's fundamentally changing kind of everything. But you could argue that it's unfortunate that it needed such a tragedy in order to enforce this, because like BIM level 2 isn't that what it was supposed to be in reality?
Agreed. I mean, BIM level 2.
which is over a decade ago now or more.
I just think it was a disaster. And, it's funny because people are already saying to me, Bola, it's likely that the digital twin conversation will end up where the BIM level 2 conversation. And I get that, right? But what I keep saying to a lot of people is, if you step back for a minute and recognize that the Building Safety Act
it's legislated.
Is a legal requirement, right? So this is slightly different. And the government, rightly or wrongly, are not going to tell you how to do it.
Yeah. It's just your responsibility to do it.
That's right. And we got to figure this thing out because we're the specialists, right? So we've got to figure it out. And then you see that there's no leadership.
Yeah.
No one wants to step up and break their business model. No one wants to do it first and get it wrong. No one wants to fail fast and learn quickly like I do.
Yeah, but what's going to happen is someone's going to go to prison. At some point, someone's going to go, if we don't start doing it. It's a legal requirement since 4th of April 24, you said, so last year.
Yeah. We've had a year. And every time I walk past a major building site, I do ask myself, are they delivering a Gateway 3 golden thread?
Yeah.
Are they doing it? Do they have a competent workforce? Does every site manager get it? Does the project director get it? Does the client get it? Is building control on top of their game? Is the building safety regular visit? All of these questions, and it only points to one outcome. Are you going to get a Gateway 3 outcome? Are you going to get sign-off and completion?
Yeah.
Right? In the right way, for the right reasons. I think it's exciting. And that's why for us, or for me personally at the Academy, I want young people to come in. This is a landscape for young people.
Yeah.
Young people are going to have a field day. Right.
Well, the fact of the matter, from a career perspective, they're going to move so fast through their career, the career ladder, purely by the fact of the knowledge base that they'll have around digitization, and all, because unfortunately for some of us older people, it takes us longer to soak up all that.
Every day is a school day.
The sponge isn't as soakable, I guess, but it is challenging, but it makes it super interesting. And the only difference I would say, from the way we look at the industry in Ireland, the same kind of legislation has happened, albeit not a safety act, but from a digitization, a BIM, a carbon and standards requirement.
It's beautiful. Beautiful.
But we have to start somewhere, and maybe we're not there yet. We don't expect to be there yet, do we? We're only in it 1 year.
Is it just a year?
It's just a year. So it will develop over time, and the industry will come up, and the training and education piece is quite interesting. But what I find the best and most kind of pleasing about it all is that government are leading it. It's not private sector, it's public sector leading it. We want this for our industry, and that's key to it all. Legislated leadership, not suggestive leadership.
Look at that. Yeah. I mean, I just think that's just amazing. And if the UK equivalent of that is the Building Safety Act, I'd be really keen to look at the mapping of the intent behind it, because it sounds as though the Irish perspective sounds more structured, with maybe better defined deliverables. I'm not sure, but I think
not there yet, really, to be honest.
But is it heading that direction?
That's where it's going. Yeah. We have the Build Digital project who are defining the processes and the requirements around each of the components for the new capital works framework, and so there's working groups working on it, and it seems to be the industry is getting behind it, and the narrative is changing. So from that perspective, it's quite interesting. And it's legislated. So the public authorities have to do it. Now, they might not know what to ask for right now. Yeah. But at least they're asking the question going, actually, I don't know what to ask for. Can anybody come in here and help me? And this is where the opportunity for little startup businesses and specialists, comes into play,
But does that take into consideration building safety or fire safety, that new agenda?
Not in the same way as the Building Safety
Well, then
Act,
I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing.
But there will be a reflection in the Irish industry,
of course,
when compared to the UK industry around the Building Safety Act, and that will also have impact on legislation for sure.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Ross, because again, I wasn't aware of it, and that's the kind of stuff that really excites me.
Yeah, it's super interesting right now. Let's get back to the next generation then of professionals entering the industry. A lot of the time when I speak to universities and students coming out, I always query them about what are they studying, what's the material, what are the projects that they're working on, what's the examination, what are the textbooks, what is it? And a lot of the time, I'm surprised by some of the curriculum because it's the same that I went through 20 something years ago, 25 years ago, and that's really bizarre to me because from my perspective, we've moved on quite significantly now in our profession.
We should have.
So, big question, are universities fit for purpose at the moment in terms of educating the next generation?
Do you know, I mean, look, you could ask 100 different lecturers that question, you get a different answer. You can ask 100 different industry professionals, get a different answer. I'm privileged and humbled and honored to have been awarded an honorary doctorate from LSBU, London South Bank University, right? So I'm now part of their alumni. I'm also the chair of their industry advisory board. My role has been to challenge, not only that they can secure re-accreditation, which they did successfully last year, but also, to your point, how future-proof are the graduates when they enter industry or leave university for those that don't enter. And like you, I've been concerned that part of the curriculum is just too traditional, too dry, too two-dimensional. And I've tried to invoke and inspire the digital piece. But, you know, what I've realized, Ross, is the main blocker in education is the way that we deliver and create those learning curriculums. They're riddled with bureaucracy and red tape, right? And the process of being able to change stuff is so slow.
It takes years.
Right.
So 3 or 5 year blocks or something.
Or worse, right? But my role has been the challenge, and by inspiring new content, new MSc programs, new undergraduate programs that talk about digital, and you kind of baking digital in. You're not saying everything is digital. But part of the challenge is that some of the teachers and lecturers themselves aren't ready.
No.
You know, so you can't really expect fabulous outcomes.
No. Even if you were to roll out a new curriculum,
if the teachers aren't ready or the lecturers aren't ready. So I think there's a lot of work to go on upskilling the learning partners and teachers and staff themselves first before you think about influencing the curriculum.
There was a good point made the last day in a conversation I was having about the educational system and the need for industry to get more involved in education, like what you're doing yourself, and making sure that we are getting people from at the front line in talking to students and delivering lectures and delivering experience and knowledge base and so on.
That's right.
And it becomes super important because if we are educating our university quantity surveyors or the next generation from textbook, I think we're in trouble because stuff is moving so quickly.
Listen,
there's a base point of construction for sure, but man, everything is moving so quickly, you know.
It worries me. I often tell a lot, you know, not only young people, but some of my peer group that the amount of new knowledge I have to consume, I would say on a daily basis, right, it would scare a lot of people. What I have to consume to stand still, Ross, right? And I think I'm ahead of the game. Others aren't even in the room, right? And so I look at some of my peers and think, you know, you carry PI to offer a service, but are you really offering the best value? If you don't know all of this stuff,
but how can you possibly?
You can't be.
You can't be advising.
No,
you can't be advising.
No, you should, or you shouldn't be advising, right? But I think the next gen coming out of university are also hampered by the fact that they're told all of this great stuff. This is what you need to do. When they get into industry, they're in a most recent or past experience business that isn't prepared or unable to move forward or even come to where they need to be. So a lot of what they've learned, they can't implement or practice because a lot of the businesses aren't ready.
That's right,
Right? And that's a false economy in many ways, right?
There's a chicken and egg situation. Is the industry ready for more educated, higher quality educated, digitized professionals, or is it still the majority of the industry prefers the traditionally educated professional coming out of university because that's the business model right now?
That's right.
So I do find it challenging for students who are really interested in pushing the boundaries within their educational specialities around digitization and sustainability and not getting the right education and right opportunity to come out.
A lot of those guys, Ross, I don't know what they're leaving or they're joining tech startups who are trying to fix things in the industry. And I think that's a really interesting concept because I think the role of most professionals, particularly every pathway at RICS, for example, will be materially different within 2 to 5 years, right? I don't think you're going to recognize a traditional QS by 2030.
No.
That's my initiative, BQS 2030. I'm like trying to figure out what will the QS, what should the QS be offering a client by 2030 as a service, as a professional service. It's not going to look anything like we're doing at the moment.
I was chatting to a friend of mine in Denmark last week when I was over, and we were just having a beer chatting away and about cost management and quantity surveying. And he said, look, the sustainability agenda is going to drive an awful lot of what you guys do if you grab onto it.
Correct.
You won't be quantity surveyors anymore. He says you'll be material flow assessors.
Look at that.
So full life cycle, full circular economy amount materials, because someone has to assess it.
Agreed.
And you guys seem to be the best positioned in terms of your knowledge base to quantify, to assess, to predict, to report on all of it.
Look at that.
So why aren't you grabbing onto it? Materials Flow Assessor. Thanks, Patrick.
Look at that.
Yeah. So it got me thinking, actually, the dynamic of what we do then changes, because it's not just pre-construction, construction phase of a project anymore. Actually, we need to now look at the entire supply chain.
Correct.
From the raw material right through to end of life as QSs. Absolutely. And we can't possibly do that in the volume we need to do it on paper or on 2D. We need to be automating systems. Right. And in order to do that, you need to have that mindset walking into it effectively. So it was just kind of this kind of light bulb moment when he mentioned it. I went, wow.
So true. I mean, and that's kind of, that's kind of where we're going. I'm pretty sure I told you about the firm that I've had dormant for 22 years called AIQS. Secrets in the name. Yeah. AIQS. But that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're actually launching a week on Monday on the 17th of Feb. Yeah. But that's a company dormant. To your point about the industry not being ready, it's been dormant for 22 years.
Yeah.
Dormant.
Yeah.
Because
we're a slow-moving tanker.
It didn't land as a viable prospect.
No. Too early to market.
22 years ago.
No.
Right. But now, with AI running rampant, what does that mean for the QS? Yeah. What does it mean for the traditional QS? It means a new business model, right? Yeah. Agile, data-driven.
Absolutely.
There you go.
Absolutely.
But a lot of those firms aren't ready, Russ.
We talk about a little bit, you mentioned earlier on about claims and contracts management, something on your thesis from back in the 90s, and going, if we can get the golden thread, if we can manage that entire process, there won't be anything as claims.
Correct.
There won't be any disagreements. There won't be any contractual issues that you'll have to deal with.
Absolutely.
With the likes of blockchain and so on. So that service, in a sense, is obsolete. Maybe not in the next 5 or 10 years, but it's going that direction, maybe next 20, so on. But nevertheless, let's dream big.
Absolutely.
And then we can look at the pre-con and the early estimations and the early cost plans. I think that's also gone. I think if we collect enough data from the industry, we can predict.
100%.
Machine learning AI can predict, not us with quantity surveyors.
We don't need to.
No.
We don't need to, Russ. We just have to trust the data. That's half our problem. Yeah. I mean, I've heard this real challenge from design teams saying, we can't feed our professional contributions into the CDE from a PI perspective. Well, this collective skin in the game is the way it's going to happen, right? We need to maybe figure out a new model of insurance.
Yeah.
But you're going to have no choice but to put your data in the context of a CDE, which will then generate its own on completion. Yeah. Whether you like it or not, that's where we're going, right? And I think that's why mindset.
Yeah. I find in an immature market that kind of topic of conversation around sharing information is the biggest challenge. In a mature market like Denmark, that just happens. Really? It's not a question anymore. You have to share your information in order to be able to collaborate, in order to be able to get the end result. Yeah. So the models are shared in IFC format or in native Revit or whatever. Nice. While they're shared into the common data environment, they're downloaded by the other stakeholder groups, they're processed, they're worked on, they're commented on. How else can we deliver a golden thread?
Are they talking about the golden thread in Denmark?
It's not used
by definition.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, but not in this. Wow. We haven't got there yet. But I do find in the pre-con stage, the design teams have really they're really open to the idea of the collaboration. You still have the contractual challenges when you transfer to contractor and, your claims process and whose responsibility for what and all that kind of good stuff. Yeah. But nevertheless, that collaboration piece is kind of there. So that question about whether we can or not share information very rarely happens in my experience.
Look at that.
But it is one of the biggest challenges, that mindset, as you said,
Huge.
the old tradition of, well, if I'm sketching it up, it's mine, it's my intellectual property. And now because I'm doing it in 3D model, you don't own any of that. That's belonged to the client who's paying you to produce it.
Exactly. And it always gets missed. Well, no, the client's buying this project. The client's paying for it.
Yeah.
You're going to divest everything over there to the client at some point.
Yeah,
so share it.
You have to. Yeah, yeah.
It's a mindset thing.
And I think maybe, again, back to the Building Safety Act, that will end up inevitably happening, because in order to be able to get your digital twin, your golden thread, it has to happen.
Do you know? And I think the challenge is vertical, Ross. It's the supply chain.
Yeah.
Because everyone's stuck up here, design team level, client level. But the real value of that golden thread is whatever happens on site, gateway 3, right? So that's your vertical supply chain. In fact, the last level of that tier 6 or 7, whoever they may be, that's where your risk is.
Yeah.
And if those guys and girls aren't competent or certified or qualified to do what you paid them to do, and you don't find out until...
Well, incident, if you like, or the tragedy,
This is why everyone has to upskill. And that's why, again, coming back to the guys and girls at university, we need to start feeding them now.
Yeah.
That's the challenge I've said to universities. Start introducing all of this stuff now. And if it can't be part of your traditional curricula, make it an add-on.
Yeah.
Make it a guest lecture. Make it something that sits outside of the framework, but make it now before they leave.
For now, at least, anyway. I think if any of the universities are looking to pivot a bit, and again, you talked about the political cycles of new curriculum, invite the guest lectures in, get a little bit of a feel for the industry, allow students to get exposure to that if they can, and it'll spark interest maybe.
That's right. That's right. I mean, the number of lectures I've done that actually the lecturers say, I've learned so much.
Yeah.
Lecturers.
Yeah.
Forget the students from
Yeah.
Lecturers are saying that was great.
Yeah. Can you come back? Yeah, excellent. Let's talk a little bit about the LSBU and the Digital Twin Skills Academy for a second. Yeah. What exactly are they, first of all, the LSBU?
Well, LSBU is the university on the South Bank.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to do with them at the academy is impart my knowledge, but in a way that they feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And by being chair of the industry advisory board, I've been able to do that well.
Yeah, cool.
But to bring some perspective to it, I've introduced now AIQS to say, look, do you know what? This is the future of the QS profession. How far away are you as a university from getting your graduates to be ready to operate in this way? And what I'm talking about, Ross, is an API-driven business model where we don't share Word, Excel, PDF.
Yeah.
We only use APIs.
Yeah.
Now, it scared the teaching fraternity initially until I described it actually. Whether you like it or not, it's happening.
Yeah.
Right? And it just has to be part of your narrative to the graduates that want to move into cost management.
Yeah. I was chatting earlier on to Andrew on a previous podcast, and he's working with Sterling, and he speaks to a lot of consultants, contractors, and so on, and a lot of the estimating community he speaks to still work off their local laptop or hard drive and not on cloud-based or common data environment.
That's right.
Workflows, which is amazing to me in this day and age that we're still doing it, but maybe I shouldn't be surprised because...
Shocking.
That's what I was doing in the noughties when I finished university and going, geez, we're on the desktop, but what if I need to go to that site? Oh, you have to take it with you, or you're kind of going, okay, there must be something better to do here than this, And then the question I had for him was, but we carry around accessibility to the common data environment and the cloud every day. We use the cloud every day in our mobile device, in every single thing we do in our mobile device. Upload your photographs, your video content, your Instagram. So the concept isn't that wild because we're already doing it. It's just the application, I guess, to our daily work environment.
And the use case, right? And that's where that whole upskilling education has to come in. But, who do you think is ready to operate in an API-driven environment, Ross? Is anybody ready? All right, Cosmo's excluded because obviously you're in it. But I mean, is the industry ready?
Yeah.
That's what the Golden Thread's about.
Yeah.
APIs,
it has to be.
right? We're nowhere near.
No.
Nowhere near.
A lot of work, but a lot of opportunity in the industry, right? That's where what it comes down to, I guess. With the Digital Twin Skills Academy then, so you said you're trying to upskill and train, and is it just QSs, or is it anybody that has an interest in digital twins or the entire concept around digitization and modeling and golden thread?
It's all of that. But we were founded, our primary reason for coming into being was Grenfell.
Okay, yeah.
April 22, I'm just leaving Cambridge and thinking, right, I've done 32 months, proved the use case, digital twins in social housing, there's a value. But this national digital twin program that we've just created and unearthed and turned into a series of papers and a toolkit, the general public aren't going to get it. So how do I now fuse the relationship between this great piece of work called the National Digital Twin and the average man and woman and child, right? And I thought the only thing we didn't really drill down to at Cambridge was skills.
Yeah.
And I thought I'm going to go and create an academy.
Yeah.
And using the building safety use case as the Trojan to sell, inspire, share, create awareness around digital twins was the reason behind the academy.
Yeah.
And then I thought, if we don't unlock the opportunity for 16 to 25 year young individuals, we're not going to create the talent pool required to feed the industry. So our strapline is we're creating the talent pool the industry doesn't know it needs.
Yeah.
Because those guys and girls will be equipped in the design, creation, maintenance of digital twins whole life.
Yeah.
And that's all they do, right? But what they need, Ross, is good construction knowledge. Yeah. So that's how I bring the two together.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's it.
It's that digital tech kind of orientation.
Digital construction.
And then the construction terminology and methodology and understanding that technical ability. Yeah.
And we're about to launch our first micro-credential.
Super.
Later this month.
Okay, awesome.
With DT Hub.
Yeah.
So, it's been, nearly 2 years now since we've been around. But the interest that we're drumming up as we link ourselves to the Building Safety Act and the Gateway 3 in particular, it's going for the roof.
Yeah.
My challenge is still the asset owner. The guys and girls that own these assets or projects are still not asking for the right outcomes. No. Many aren't asking for a 5D twin, and they should be. No. The same way they're asking for traditional O&M manuals, they should be asking for a 5D twin. And I think to that point, was the biggest client group for us is the insurance sector. Yeah. Because once the insurance sector gets this, it'll unlock everything.
Yeah. Similar to the sustainability and green finance, right? So if you can control, I won't say guarantee, but if you can control the entire process of building an operation and you have visibility on all decision making and the operational output, surely it has a positive effect then on the insurance industry and insurance cover and so on. Yeah.
But green finance excites me because you look at the Middle East now. 95% of those projects are being funded by an element of green finance. And they're actually dictating the outcomes before you get to build.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing.
It is, It's removing that return on investment as only a financial number, and it's really looking at the entire life cycle or ESG impact. I would say like that environmental, social, governance impact on it's having on society. It's super interesting. There's so many layers really happening, isn't there, over the last kind of 10 years? That's really kind of. It seems to be coming to a pressure point now where it's just going to go and explode over the next 5,
I think so. And I think, but, you see the common denominator is digitization. Yeah. Right? None of that's going to happen.
No.
Without digitization.
It can't. It's too slow, right? Without digitization, everything's too slow, it's too laborious, it's too time consuming, it's too costly. We're not going to do it. Let's continue what we're doing because we know it well. But it leads nicely into, like, in your opinion, where are we heading in the future here? It's difficult to predict a 20-year, 30-year life cycle, but in the next 5 years to 2030.
Where are we heading? Look, it's a great question. My view is based on the initiative called PQS 2030. That for me is it, right? Now that initiative really began 2019. Yeah. Our dear friend Alan Muse, our FRICS, right? He was there, right? RICS HQ in the main reception taking that photo. And I said to Alan, I really want to disrupt the profession by 2030, right? So that gave me, 10, 11-year window. Yeah. We are 6 years in, right? we're nowhere near us.
No.
So I think realistically, because of the legal requirement called the golden thread, I think we're going to start to make inroads now.
Yeah.
But I'd like to think that by 2030, the traditional PQS, not the contracted QS, the PQS will not be doing any form of measurement or quantification. We will actually become strategic advisors, right? Yeah. And our domain will be cost, time, and quality with a focus on sustainability. Mm-hmm. That's where we're going. Yeah. I don't think many people are ready for it. Mm. I keep getting told that, well, clients don't want any of that stuff. They just want us to measure and price buildings, right? Some clients want that.
But clients can change their mind overnight.
Exactly.
They can just go, actually, do you know what I asked for yesterday? I don't want that anymore. I now need this. And suddenly you need to be ready as a consultant, but because you haven't upskilled, it's going to take you 1.5 years or 2 years to upskill. You can't answer the question.
That's right. And that's why I think the academy means so much to me, because I know that, we've got to do 20 hours CPD anyway. We've got to do that, right? Yeah. And I'm saying as part of that process, digital has to become baked in, right? Yeah. It's not a bolt-on. It's not a side. It's not a side track. It's just involved and meshed into that entire conversation we're having. Always, and at least if you make 20% of your 20 hours specifically focused on digital skilling, upskilling, being able to work and coexist in an API-driven environment, then the QS in particular, in the context of that whole design team, will step up and start to lead in a way that they've never led before. Yeah. And most of the project managers, I don't know whether you realize this, most project managers have a QS background for something, right? You notice the trend?
That's what's happening,
So I think with that and becoming the lead consultant, the global market becomes a really interesting place.
I think it's been, over the last 20 years, the rise of the PMC consultancy, the big QS practices.
That's right.
The ones, it's kind of, there has been this amalgamation of QSs stepping into project management rather than project managers coming from the engineering architectural background. It seems to be a natural transition for them as they get further up along the career ladder, if you like.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing. I think that is the person specification that a lot of clients are going to be looking for. Yeah. That leadership piece with the technical background, but the ability to embrace digital. Yeah. That's the person spec, I think. And it's going to be in the market.
I do think it will change over. I think clients will have a different opinion from one day to the next, just like that.
Yeah, of course. And it's their prerogative, right?
It is, because maybe they read a book, maybe they listen to a podcast and suddenly go, hang on a sec, we have not been thinking about this. I need to ask my consultants on Monday morning about this.
Well, I think an even bigger eureka moment would be if their insurance company said, actually, if you want us to give you construction phase cover, we need an API to your twin. Yeah. That is going to be a game changer. Yeah. It's coming, because it's happening in North America. It's happening in Singapore. Yeah. Singapore's already got a city-level twin in operation, right?
Yeah. So all your planning, everything, if you're building a building there, all needs to be submitted. It's all part of the entire strategy around the Singaporean 3D model,
That was years ago. Yeah. Coming up to a decade. Yeah. Singapore. Yeah.
It's wonderful. So if we can take all of these bits, from around the world and kind of amalgamate them,
I think we have to. We've got no choice. We have to. We've got this reputation as a leader.
Yeah.
We've got to step up and lead now, right?
Excellent. Great way to finish, Bola. I really appreciate your time today, and it's great to have you sitting down face to face after such a long time.
After so many years. Thank you very much for the invitation, Ross. Pleasure.
Thanks very much for listening. There's a LinkedIn link below in the show notes. We would love to connect with you.
We hope you enjoyed it and have you with us in the next one. Thank you very much.